Hi, I'm Dr. Duke, and I'm joined today by William F. Jasper, a senior editor at The New American. Bill, thank you so much for joining me. I always love having you on the show.
Pleasure being here.
Now, this is one of those things. We had a huge United Nations conference in Utah over the past week, and no one seems to be talking about it. It's not in the news. It's the first I ever heard about it when I knew I was going to be interviewing you today, but it was kind of a big deal. It was a United Nations conference on civility. In what way?
Well, this is the 68th UN conference on civil society, or that's what they call it, civil society. This is supposed to be the global vox populi. This is the will of the people being expressed democratically through thousands of representatives of NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And the importance of this particular one, which I just attended for 3 days in Salt Lake City, is several fold. First of all, it is a preparatory program, as all of these civil society confabs are, to gather activists together, get them prepped, get them all queued up for a special event. And what is the special event? Well, there are two of them, actually three of them, coming up in just a couple of weeks in New York City at the United Nations headquarters. First of all, there's going to be the Global Youth Climate Action Conference. And so many of the youth, and this conference in Salt Lake City focused on the youth, high school and college age students and other young people, bringing them to New York City to activate youth all over the world to push for more global warming regulation and empowerment of the United Nations. The second thing is the main event is on the 23rd of September. That's the Climate Action Summit of world leaders, where presidents, prime ministers, poobahs, etc. will be in New York City to again tell us that the world is ending if we don't change our ways, if we don't allow them, the governments of the world and the United Nations, to regulate us into oblivion. Thirdly, on the same day, on September 23rd, there's another UN summit. This is a twofer on a global summit on universal health care. So they're going to be pushing for socialized medicine. So the kids are going to be there, and all of these other human rights groups, feminist groups, environmental groups, agitating not only for that, but also for Agenda 2030. That was in the first sentence of their declaration in Salt Lake City, is that this civil society summit is to promote the United Nations Agenda 2030, which is an extension of Agenda 21, which was launched at the Earth Summit in 1992, which I also attended.
Sounds like, if I may describe it this way, a bit of a boot camp for the upcoming activist movements in New York and other places. How many kids would you say attended this, and what was the climate like there, if I can use that word? What was the climate like? Yes. Are these true believers? Are these wide-eyed kids who are being indoctrinated? What was it like on the ground in Salt Lake City for this conference?
Well, it was just as you described. It was a boot camp, and most of those coming there gave the appearance of being true believers. Now, it was hard to get a firm count. We were told that somewhere around 6,000, maybe 7,000 activists would be there. It didn't look like there were quite that many. I tried to calculate a few times, so maybe 5,000 attended. And of that, I'd say there were at least 1,000 youth, high school and college age students. Interestingly and encouragingly, there were about 100 or close to it young people, high schoolers, mostly homeschoolers, who were very intelligent, very articulate, and were challenging the orthodox narrative that the other brainwashed youth were regurgitating. All the stuff about the world is ending in 11 years if we don't change our ways and stop global warming. We have to have sustainability, inclusivity, all of those things that they're calling for, except that there was no real inclusivity there, which is typical of what you see at all these UN conferences. In other words, there were no presenters at any of these dozens and dozens of workshops and plenary sessions and whatnot that put forward a pro-family, pro-Christian, pro-life ethos or nationalist ethos. Everything was global citizen. It was all transgender, LGBTQ. Of course, one of the main speakers there was the mayor of Salt Lake City, Biskupski, Jackie Biskupski, who is an open lesbian and is really aggressively pushing the LGBTQ perversion in Utah. And she brought in the former mayor of Houston, an open lesbian, to be a conference speaker as well. But that's what you saw there. They did not allow any diversity except when these kids or some of the women who came there representing pro-life groups or whatnot, when they would stand up at the plenary session and ask a question. That was the limit of the diversity there.
How were some of these homeschool kids or dissenting kids, how were they received by the people in charge?
Very interesting. When they were at the plenary session and they would get up to the microphone and they'd ask a question, you could see, and you'll see on the video that we took there, some of these people up on the stage, the UN officials, are quite uncomfortable. It's an awkward moment for them. They can't come right out and slap down these high school students. That wouldn't look good. So they try to move away and say, well, thank you very much. We will be looking at that. Please submit your concerns to the committee. But however, when I was interviewing one of the mothers who was there, a very intelligent and articulate woman from California who had been challenging in California the sex programs there, all the LGBTQ stuff that's being forced on them. She came there, and so I was interviewing her outside of the plenary, and a couple of the UN honchos came and stood behind us and were behind me and were scowling at her and showing their displeasure that she was being interviewed. And then we interviewed another couple of ladies, and the UN officials actually came up after we finished interviewing them and said, do you really think you should be interviewing them? Do you think they really represent the voice of the people here? So that's their idea of diversity. I mean, never would they say anything like that if I were interviewing Mayor Jackie Biskupski. Does she represent the people of Utah? I don't think so. She got in through a very disingenuous and external program where a lot of money and a lot of activists were brought in to get her elected mayor. And so, I mean, it really shows the kind of actual Soviet-style, Chinese communist-style way in which they run these operations. And, of course, that isn't surprising to anyone who's been following, particularly Alex Newman's articles on how the Chinese Communist Party has taken over so much of the apparatus within the United Nations.
Bill, we have about a minute and a half left. I'd like to ask you two quick questions. One, who's paying for all this? Where are they getting their money from? And who are some of the more mainstream American supporters of this? Were there corporations involved? Were there private entities? Who's funding this, both from the U.S. perspective?
One of the big funders of it was very, very public there, was Sony Corporation. In fact, one of my latest stories is a review of, a critique of Sony Picture Entertainment, the Angry Birds movie 2, which just came out. And John Rigo, the executive vice president for sustainable development for Sony Corp, was there. He got up on the stage and just was so effusive in his praise of the United Nations and of the partnership, this new movie, which is made for kids to propagandize little kids and scare them to death about global warming and convince them to jump on the global warming bandwagon. Angry Birds 2 was made in partnership with the United Nations, a formal partnership they declared. And so Sony Corporation, Wells Fargo, Zion Bank, a lot of different corporations, which we've listed in a couple of our articles, are getting behind this. Some of them because they are approached and they want to appear to be good global citizens. Others because they are corporations which are run by globalists who really believe in pushing forward what the United Nations has called for and the Commission on Global Governance has called for of world government, a new world order. And so that's what they're pushing here. And I have said previously, I said in my articles, this is really child abuse. They are psychologically traumatizing children and young people to use them as fodder in their ideological crusade.
William Jasper, senior editor of The New American, thank you for this really timely report. I'd like to see somebody else besides the TNA covering this. This is a big story. We need more of it. Thanks again.